If you're an ambitious founder, but you're kind of lazy, how do you get traction in the marketplace? This is how. In this conversation, I'm going to walk through how you can completely change the game in terms of how you get people to pay attention to you. This is called winning in the attention economy, and it doesn't involve doing anything cringe. In fact, this is actually one of the key problems that I help solve for founder-led B2B startups who are at that stage where they don't have product market fit. For those of you where this is your first time on this channel, I'm Dr. Jim. I've been in the startup space for the better part of a decade and a half. I've always been in roles that involved breaking new territories, launching new brands, and I've done that in staffing, in HR tech, TA tech, ed tech, and executive coaching. Those are the lanes that I play in. And my particular set of skills, to borrow a Liam Neeson phrase, is that I excel in areas where you have to build something from nothing. So if you're a startup founder who's bootstrapped, who doesn't have investors coming out of their ears who are just throwing money at you, and you want to figure out a scrappy way to get to traction, this is the right channel for you. So I encourage you to go ahead and like and subscribe and drop comments and questions and all that sort of stuff. So let's set the stage here. Everyone who's a founder has a motor. There's a reason why we all decided to take the leap and launch a new product or service into the market. We've been there and done that. We've cut our teeth and we've learned a lot of things. And now we feel like we're ready to hit the marketplace and actually launch this product or service. Now, the challenge that you'll run into is, how do I get what I have in front of the right people so I can actually validate whether what I have is actually something that people will pay for? And that's where it gets difficult. So there's no such thing as a lazy founder. All of us have a motor and we have the ambition to get stuff done, but very few of us have the will to pound away on the phones or on email over and over again, thousands of times, in the hopes of just getting one meeting. That's not sustainable for a lot of us. I'm the exception to that rule. And what I'm going to tell you in this conversation is how you can completely change the game in terms of how you do outreach. And it actually lowers the barrier for you to have meaningful conversations with people that you want to get in front of. I'm sure everybody's experienced a selling slump, but have you ever gone 0 for 6,000? I have. And on the flip side, have you ever gone 300 for 300? I've done that as well. And both of these things happened at the same company. Let me share with you a story. I've been in this situation multiple times where I've had to build something from nothing. And probably one of the most frustrating experiences that I had was during my first foray in the executive coaching space. And in that space, I was brought into an organization as their director of global new business development. And they wanted to transition from a referral-based organization to an organization that was much more successful in going outbound and getting net new business with new accounts. And to me, that was right in my wheelhouse. That's been my entire career. I did that in the construction tech space. I did that in the retail space. I did that in the ATS space. I did that in the staffing space. So not a problem. The thing that I didn't account for was that when I walked in, they had an existing playbook that they spent thousands of dollars on. And usually when you have a playbook, it should be something that's battle tested. This one wasn't. So the first handful of weeks that I got in, most of my time was spent executing that playbook. And that meant going outbound across all the different channels that I had available to me. So that included email, LinkedIn, it included cold calls. So multi-threading the whole thing. And that was no big deal. Here's what became a big deal. I did probably 6,000 pieces of outbound touch points and got zero response. Think about the effort involved in that over a 3 or 4 week period where you're cranking out 6,000 pieces of outreach across all those different channels, and all you get are crickets. You go 0 for 6,000. It's a gut punch. And it's single-handedly one of the biggest failures in outbound that I've ever experienced. Have you experienced anything that terrible? And if you have, drop that in the comment. Even if you haven't, I'd be curious to hear about what was the biggest gut punch that you experienced in your founder journey. Let me know in the comments. That's when I knew that this playbook wasn't built based on lessons learned out in the wild. It was built in the boardroom. And when you're dealing with something like that, You have to strip everything down to the studs and start over. So when I looked at everything in that playbook, none of that had actually been validated from customer feedback. So we had to start completely over. And that's when I actually started applying some of the lessons that I learned in other earlier opportunities and implemented that within this organization. So we tore everything down to the studs, and I presented a plan where we are embedding content into our outbound to get access to the people that we need to get access to and have meaningful conversations with those buyers so that we can actually understand what moves them, what makes them want to buy from us. What are the problems that they're dealing with? So we're actually building that GTM messaging and validation and product and market research all on the fly. I went ahead and put a plan together and put a strategy together, broke down the execution points from what our outbound looks like, what our callings look like, what our email needs to look like, and I embedded a content layer into it, presented it to the board and the executive team, and it stalled. So me being me, I just decided to go rogue and I spun up my own outbound engine using the principles that I had laid out in that strategy document. And that was the origin of Cascading Leadership. And you can still find that podcast out there, but what you'll notice is that that podcast was built from the lessons learned from hearing absolutely nothing, from 6,000 plus pieces of outbound touch points that yielded crickets. So I took that strategy document, developed it into Cascading Leadership, and targeted executive HR leaders, executive learning and development leaders. And you can still find that podcast out there. And it had over 300 episodes. And the vast majority of those episodes included in-depth conversations with the ICP that is relevant to an executive coaching organization. And I didn't have to do 6,000 pieces of outbound to get those conversations. It was a near 1-to-1 conversion rate. Anytime I identified a potential guest for the show that was in our ICP, I sent them a message and they were interested in being on the show. That is a complete game changer. And it's not as if I hadn't done that before. What I used in that experience was very similar to what I did when we were expanding a construction tech company. At that construction tech organization, I had a prototype of what I used at the coaching organization, and using that same approach, I was able to take that construction tech company from a 40 customer organization to a 300 customer organization. And we opened 2 new markets, one in Canada and one in Malaysia. So the lesson here is that you don't need to be someone that grinds away and then just keeps pounding the rock to try to get something new out of it. This is one of those many instances that goes to show that when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, sometimes it just makes sense to go completely rogue and think completely out of the box. Which has me thinking, what's the time in your career and in your founder journey that you went completely out of the box in terms of a new approach and it really paid off? Let me know in the comments. If you're finding what I'm talking about interesting and you want to learn more, make sure you book a call with me. Use the scheduling link in the show notes and we can have a strategy session and potentially create some breakthroughs for you so that you can get traction in the marketplace. The lesson in both of these examples is that by shifting how you think about how to go outbound, especially if you're in a 0-to-1 stage, it's a game-changing experience for you when it comes to messaging validation, product validation, market research, and getting traction. Because all of that stuff are wins, including the pipeline that you build from it. And you'll get bottom line wins on it as well. This is actually how you grow and how you get traction. Think about the difference that that would make in your operation right now. You're probably in a situation where you've had 6,000 pieces of outbound go out. And you might have booked a few things here or there. And then the things that you booked, half of them ghosted. And then the other half that kept the meeting ghosted you after that. Unless you have unlimited funds, you can't go at that burn rate and expect to be successful because you're never going to get traction. You might get wins, but they might not be the right wins. And you won't know why you won because you haven't built the relationship strong enough for you to be able to have those conversations. And that's why I'm a huge advocate for embedding content that allows you to align yourself with the buyer journey and your sales process all in one, so it creates a frictionless experience for your buyers. This is how you remove the resistance that you get when you try to go outbound. Because every company out there is going outbound with some sort of problem statement or trigger event that they're trying to leverage into a conversation. What I'm advocating for is something completely different. Instead of doing what everybody else does, go a different direction. Go the direction where you're actually seeking to understand instead of trying to be understood. And you're taking the effort to identify key people that you want to connect with and spotlight their expertise. And trust me when I say this, it's going to completely change your trajectory in terms of the conversations that you'll have. And it's going to change the trajectory in terms of how often you can go back to those folks and ask for additional time, because you've done the most important thing. You've built the relationship on a foundation of trust and spotlighting their expertise instead of you going to market trying to be transactional to see what you can extract from them. So the TLDR of all of this is, if you're a founder, we know you have a motor. If you're a founder, we know you have the work ethic. But just because you have a motor and just because you have the work ethic doesn't mean that you need to spam your TAM and just carpet bomb your entire customer marketplace to try to get one conversation. Instead, create an experience that inspires and educates your audience to come to you, that inspires your audience and your potential customer to want to have a conversation with you. And that's what I help people do. And that's what I help startup founders do, because that's how you actually go from 0 to 1 to growth to traction. So if you like this conversation, or if you have more questions, I have my booking link in the show notes. Go ahead and schedule a strategy call and we can talk shop and I can help you out in how you can go to market. If you like this conversation, make sure you drop me a follow. And the key thing for you to remember in this is that you don't need to work yourself to the bone. You have the ambition. It's okay to work smarter. You don't gain or lose style points because you didn't send out 6,000 messages. The bottom line is you want people to want to take your call and you want to give people an experience. And if you do that consistently, you won't find yourself in a situation where you're throwing 6,000 pieces of outbound into the marketplace and hearing nothing but crickets. Hope this helps. Drop me a comment or question. If there is anything about this that you want more details on, I'll respond to it on the channel. Tune in on the next conversation where I'll lay out a 6-step GTM framework that's relevant to the 0 to 1 founder. It's a completely different game than somebody that's already got traction. Make sure you check that one out. And while you're here, check out this playlist and check out this episode.